Mel Albin. I'm the host and the founder of the Jazz Confusion
My
Power
name
Hour.
is Diane, and I'm honored to share my passion of music with you, our listening audience, through my cultural heritage.
Things can change for you too. If you want to be brand new, that is absolutely possible.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Jazz Confusion Power Hour. I'm your host, Mel Albin. I'm also the founder of the Source TV radio network, and we have another great show for you tonight. I'm sure you're going to really enjoy. So let me start off by telling new viewers or new listeners something about Source TV radio, and then I'll tell everybody a little bit about the Power Hour too. I created the Power Hour to feature some of the best in smooth jazz and jazz crossover, jazz gospel, jazz rock, jazz blues, jazz country, anything where jazz interfaces with any other subgenre. And we've been very successful having some of the best artists you can find really on the Power Hour. I want to take you backstage and into the mind of the artists, those who create the music that everybody loves so much. The Power Hour broadcasts weekly on the Source TV radio network. We broadcast live in streaming 4K, and we're the only radio station who broadcasts in Dolby True HD. Now, Source Radio is a nonprofit 501c3 radio station, and we have two missions. One is to support jazz and jazz artists 24/7, and the other mission is Black micro and minority micro businesses too small to make a profit on Shopify or Amazon. We have a show called the Shop Black Enterprise Showcase, and we allow these micro business owners to be able to spend 10 minutes telling everybody about their products and services so they can build generational wealth and be able to be more participatory as merchants in the global market. So that tells you something about what we do. Now, we are a 501c3, so any donations or contributions that anybody makes, we greatly appreciate. We depend on our listeners' contributions, artists who we have on the show to help support our station, so we can help support them. And also we depend on listener contributions too. And all of this support helps defray the cost of advertising the cost of broadcasting. So any contributions that are made are greatly appreciated, and remember, they're always tax deductible. Now, the Power Hour has had over 150 artists, well-known and becoming well-known, musicians and vocalists. Some of the artists on the Power Hour, I'm going to read you a list so you get a feeling for what you can expect from this show every week. It includes Eric Roberson, Mesa, Brian Culbertson, Paul Brown, Raheem DeVaughn, Reagan Whiteside, Felix Cavalieri, Alex Harris, Samara Joy, Greg Adams, Tom Brown, Costello, Pieces of a Dream, Kiko Matsui, Tim Scott, Sheryl Crow, Billy Ocean, Annie Lennox, Dwelle, Maria Antoinette, Eddie Levert, Bob James, Jay Brown, Yulia, Blake Aaron, Her, Celine Johnson, Aaron Stevenson, Smokey Robinson, Cecily, the great late Bobby Caldwell, Jeff Bradshaw, Jeff Beck, Dion Parson, Tammy McCann, Eric Burden, and many others. So that gives you some flavor for the range of artists that we've had on the Power Hour over the past 6 years. Now, tonight is no exception. We're bringing you another terrific artist. By blending a unique mix of jazz, R&B, classical, and Latin music, he's one of the most exciting multi-genre art musicians today. He is well respected throughout the industry for his work as a saxophonist, a woodwind player, an arranger, a composer, an educated, and a Billboard charting artist. I'm getting more of my notes here. 1 second, please. Okay. He has toured with Bobby Caldwell, Diane Schuur, and Smokey Robinson. After releasing 4 contemporary jazz CDs in 2018, that marked the debut of his big band jazz album, Catwalk, featuring soloists Rick Braun, Randy Brecker, Gordon Goodwin, Eric Marenthal, and Bob Mincer. His arrangements have been played by the Airmen of Note, the Count Basie Orchestra, Bobby Santabria, a Grammy-nominated album, Janice Siegel, Bobby Caldwell, and the Bernie Dreisel Big Band. He returned to smooth jazz in 2022, releasing 5 chart-topping singles that have been in heavy rotation on Sirius XM watercolors. He has been featured as a performer on the horn arranger on top 5 billboards, ranging from Blake Aaron, Lisa Adio, Carol Albert, Brian Bromberg, Adam Hawley, David Sanborn, and Peter White. Additionally, he has contributed to recent singles from Paul Brown, Tommy Davidson, Dave Koz, Freddie Fox, Audrey Logan, Michael Polo, Roberta Restuccia, Jeff Ryan, Les Sabler, Roberto Valli, and Rob Zinn. He's a graduate of Temple University, and he currently conducts the jazz program at Swarthmore College and is in demand as a guest conductor and soloist. He's been hosting a radio show at Villanova University since 2022. So tonight, our special guest, and please welcome Andrew Neu. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, Mel. Thanks for having me.
How are
I'm
you?
glad to be here.
I'm delighted to have you.
That was a great intro. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. It's well deserved. I'd like to start off by having our artists telling all of our listeners and viewers what's cooking for the rest of 2026. What are you up to? The new recordings, studio work, concerts. What are you doing?
All of that stuff. Actually, yeah, I have a lot of stuff coming up coming up the next few weeks. I'm starting with next Thursday, the July 16th. I'm playing the national anthem at the Philadelphia Phillies games. That's probably my biggest audience. That'll be about 40,000 people. Then heading to the West Coast, I'm doing a co-bill with my friend Rob Zinn on trumpet. We're playing in San Diego. And then I go out for 3 days with Keiko Matsui. I've been doing a lot of shows with her, so I'll be with her in Detroit, Columbus, and Cleveland, and then heading back to LA, San Diego again, and we're doing all of my old Bobby Caldwell bandmates are getting together, and we are doing a tribute to our old boss and friend and mentor, Bobby Caldwell, and that's going to be at the South Coast Winery out in Temecula. That's actually produced by Michael Paolo, who's another good friend of ours. So that's coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mentioned I had Bobby on my show, previously, and he was when I first started the show. He was on it.
He does a great interview. His stories are amazing.
Oh yeah, I've had great guests. All my guests have great stories. It's been wonderful. So, let's talk a little bit about your childhood. I like to give people a feeling for how did Andrew Neu become the musician that he is. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your family of origin, the city you were born in, early musical influences, how you came to the saxophone?
Yeah, I think it was actually in some ways it was a very traditional route. In other ways, not so much. I grew up in a musical family in as much that my older brother and older sister were both, playing instruments as we were all growing up. My father is now a retired engineer. My mom always just was the person that sat in the audience, but they supported us playing music. My brother is a trumpet player. We still do a lot of gigs together. He's been on a bunch of my recordings, and my sister, is also a musician. So I wanted to play either the drums or the saxophone when I got the chance to learn. And they said, no, we don't want you to play those instruments. They're too loud. You can play the clarinet. So I started on clarinet, which actually, in retrospect, I'm really grateful for because it gave me a really great foundation of playing all the other woodwind instruments. Obviously, saxophone, it was an easy transition, but also flute. And it just gave me a familiarity with a lot of other approaches to playing music. But the thing that was really different about my upbringing was that my parents were actually more fans of classical music. So probably the first 9-10 years of my life, we really only listened to classical music in the house. And it wasn't until my big brother probably got his license and had control over the car radio that all of a sudden we started listening to, probably some pop and rock radio. But he also, my older brother, who's 7 years older than me, turned me on to, he was listening to trumpet music. So it was Chuck Mangione, it was Maynard Ferguson, but also the Brecker brothers. So I heard Michael Brecker and Randy Brecker from very early on, and then by extension David Sanborn, Grover Washington, but the other big bands too, yeah, Buddy Rich and Woody Herman, Stan Kenton. So it was really, you know, a huge intro to, oh, and Earth, Wind and Fire. I remember hearing down the hall, my bedroom, hearing the beginning of In the Stone. I vividly remember this moment, and I'm sure I was, you know, as I said, 9 or 10 years old, and that just wall of sound and brass was just like, this is something I need to find out more of. So I was very grateful to have that.
Did you listen to Tower of Power too?
Oh, for sure, absolutely. And it was back then. It was, I mean, you know, it was harder just to get your hands on music. So people would talk about these. A band like Tower of Power wasn't something you would hear on the radio all the time. It was like, oh, they had this great song. It's called "What Is Hip." It's like, I need to hear this song. Everyone's talking about this song. And then, and unfortunately, like when they would come into Philly, they were always playing like clubs, and clubs were always over 21. So when I was a teenager, I couldn't go to see them because, you know. So, every time I've heard them live since then and have gotten to know a lot of the guys that have been through that band, I mean, they're all just such tremendous musicians at the top of their game every time you hear them on stage. I mean,
You know,
certainly an inspiration.
One of the founders, Greg Adams, started East Bay Soul a few years ago. So I don't know if you're familiar with East Bay Soul, but it's a great band.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I do a lot of recording with the other trumpet player, Mike Stever, in that band.
Oh, okay.
So Mike Stever and Nick Lane, who is now playing trombone with Chicago, another band that I grew up listening to. The three of us actually do a lot of recording together as a horn section from our own home studios. We're all arrangers, and we all have, you know, different clients coming into us, and well, either of us will do the arrangement, and then we'll get the other guys to cut the parts, and it's become a really good synergy.
You also play woodwinds. How did you get into that?
Actually, it goes back to my relationship with Brian Bromberg, who started. I was introduced to him, I think, on my second smooth jazz record through a mutual friend that we had in LA, and we had a good personal and you know, musical working relationship. And he always loved having real musicians on his instrument, on his albums, just as I do, and a lot of horns. And you know, I think just sort of the combination of just knowing different musicians that he asked me to start writing for him. And so at some point, you know, the three of us sort of became his go-to horn section for all of his albums. And then, and I guess the word got out, and all of a sudden now we're doing things for Paul Brown, we're doing things for Adam Hawley, Blake Aaron. We're doing a couple of projects. In fact, we have one right now for Najee. So it's pretty exciting, because I feel like in some ways we're starting to influence the genre by bringing big horn writing back into smooth jazz.
How many instruments do you play, actually?
That's a really good question. And I think, you know, as I said, I started on clarinet. I added flute. I started taking piano lessons. I added saxophone. So it's not so much that I switched to other instruments. I sort of added them. And I always loved trumpet. You know, I grew up listening to it. I was joking the other night that a lot of my best friends are trumpet. Their trumpet players are either my best friends or my mortal enemies. There's something about that instrument that is just, you know, it creates a lot of emotions there. But I always loved trumpet, so I always do a lot of writing for trumpet. That by extension, having my own big band too. But so I started playing a lot of trumpet, and it helped me as a composer to know how to write for these other instruments. At one point I was taking bass lessons and I was playing some bass, but I didn't quite have the calluses for that, I think so. But I know,
I'm sorry,
I kind of know the vocabulary. I know what the instrument can do.
Okay. Did you play an instrument in high school?
Oh, for sure. I'm a proud product of a public school music education program. My brother taught music in the public schools for 30 years. My sister is a music educator. My wife is a music educator. I stay connected with music education by doing a college jazz band at Swarthmore College, and also conduct like all-state honors jazz bands and stuff like that. So I stay connected to the music education community because, you know, for a lot of us, a lot of young people, that is their introduction to playing jazz, as it was for me in high school, was playing in my school jazz band.
But tell everybody a little bit about being raised in Philadelphia, because Philadelphia is so rich in music. Gamble and Huff, the Wall of Sound. I mean, all that stuff. So much of it emanated in Philadelphia. What influence did that have on your music?
It's the sound of Philadelphia. I mean, I feel like it took everything they were doing in Motown and then added another level of sophistication. When you had artists like the Spinners and the Tramps and Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, Teddy Pendergrass, and they had all this other orchestration on there, as you say, Gamble and Huff, these other great Tom Bell, Linda Creed, these other great composers, Ain't No Stopping Us Now, and a lot of those musicians, like they're still around. They're still floating
Yeah.
around. They played on all those classic recordings. They really defined an era. But at the same time, you had this incredible jazz scene. I mean, we had John Coltrane here. We had Stan Getz. Dizzy Gillespie was here for a long time. Grover, who was born in Buffalo, you know, both he adopted Philly and Philly adopted him. He really became someone that was synonymous with Philadelphia. I didn't know Grover, but I've come to know his wife very well, who is a lovely person, just a dear friend and a woman as a person and as an icon in the industry. She's kept the flame going, but also a lot of the musicians, Gerald Veasley, who played with Grover over the years. They're still here and they're keeping that legacy going.
Well, because of Grover's Philadelphia connection, Curtis Harmon, and Pieces of a Dream, they toured with him when they were still in high school, and they were one of the originators of smooth jazz. And it came out of Grover. So, I mean, that's why I wanted to talk about Philadelphia, because I think that's so fundamental in your own musical development and the choices that you made, in terms of genre.
A lot of talent here in Philly. And it's exciting to know that a lot of it has been exported, because I think in a lot of ways, it can still be very provincial, that like the Philly community is so tight that it doesn't always branch out as much as it needs to. But fortunately, we have, Boyz II Men, we had Jill Scott, Joey DeFrancesco, Christian McBride, Questlove, The Roots.
Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman was the Gamble and Huff, protege. She worked with them too. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, well, look, we gotta move on. I'm really enjoying the conversation already. After high school, what did you do?
I stayed in Philly and I went to Temple University and studied classical saxophone. Really, it's a thing. I laugh about it. In a lot of ways, there were some other saxophone players that I went to college with that played circles around me in the jazz world. Learning classical saxophone, it instilled a certain discipline, because I think the saxophone, it's just the learning curve is fairly, flat. It's not a super hard instrument to get a sound out of. But I think to elevate it to that next level, you really need to apply the same discipline that you would as a violinist, as a piano player, just a brass player. Just staying at the same level requires a certain amount of maintenance on the instrument. And saxophone, you can be very lazy with it. Studying this with a very disciplined approach really taught me the instrument really well. And from that point, it allowed me to play a lot of different styles of music after that, because I had the musical sensibility, the sense of pitch, tuning, the quality of sound, the clarity of technique helped me once I started doing that deep dive down the rabbit hole into the other genres of music.
What's your sax of choice? You play Barry? What's your favorite?
I would say right now the quick answer is tenor saxophone. That's my tenor back there. But
I saw that, but I was just wondering whether you started out as a tenor or started out with Barry, how you started.
I did start on tenor and then gravitated to alto. And again, as a classical saxophone major, most of the literature was written for that. But then at some point, I sort of gravitated back to tenor and really felt that, even though I felt like I played the other instruments well, because I do play Barry, I play soprano, that I feel like my true voice is on tenor sax. It just feels the one that I feel the most just comfortable, natural, honest with.
I'm sure everybody now is dying to hear some of your music, so we're going to play the first song of the evening. I want to first apologize to everybody, because I don't have all the cover art for all the songs that it was sent to me, but somehow in translation, I only have one cover. So Andrew can explain which songs belong to which album, or which were released as singles as we go along. The first song I want to play tonight is Bring It On. So why don't you tell people about the background of Bring It On and maybe what album it came from?
This actually was from my last smooth jazz record, which was the album was called Everything Happens for a Reason. And in a lot of ways, it was the prototype of the music that I started releasing when I came back to smooth jazz in 2022. And we had recorded this with Rick Braun, Brian Bromberg, Jeff Lorber. The band was crazy, but we never dropped it as a single. And, you know, I always liked the tune, but, you know, never felt like it got the attention that it needed to. So we kind of went back to it. I redid my saxophone parts and decided to release it as a single. And Rick gave his consent. And Rick and I played it live together just last year. So it was a song that I wrote during a hurricane, which in retrospect maybe wasn't the smartest thing, but I was like, yeah, bring it on. And anyway, that's the title. So
well, okay, we're going to play the song, but I want you to remember, I want to come back to something that you said. You came back to smooth jazz in 2022. I want you to talk about that hiatus, where you started out. If you were in smooth jazz, why did you leave and come back? So keep that in the back of your mind, and let's play the first song of it for tonight. This is Bring It On by Andrew Neu, and with the wrong cover art. Thank you. Wonderful. People are already loving it, Andrew. Let me give you some comments we got. Here's one. Joshua McNee. I have followed you for years. I love your impressive tone and technique, but also your deep hands-on understanding of the jazz tradition.
That's great. Wow.
Yeah, people like, yeah, we have a very sophisticated audience, by the way.
Clearly. Yeah, I see that. And you had the cover art for that.
Oh, that was the right cover art.
That was
See,
the
I
right
didn't
cover. Yeah.
even, hey, 1 for 1.
I know. We're on a roll.
Yeah. Now we have Petler Nelson, Love the Groove.
Nice.
Janet Robinson, great arrangement. You got some fans or new fans, I'm not sure which, but people are loving your music.
That's wonderful. Oh God, that made my night.
Great. Let's go back and let's talk a little bit more. What I wanted to spend a little time on is to talk to you about songwriting, but I want to revisit something you said just before we played Bring It On. You said that you came back to jazz in 2022. When did you leave?
I left as a I guess as a solo, really pursuing the career as a solo artist. I stepped away and really focused on doing the big band, and I've always been love playing in big bands, but more importantly, I love composing for big bands. And I'd accumulated a body of work that I was ready to record at that point, and that's when I really focused on that. Released that album, but at the time, I was also felt that I was actively doing things in the smooth jazz genre by touring with Bobby Caldwell. I was playing all the venues. We were touring the world. He was giving me a lot of solo spots. So I was really kind of scratching that itch that I didn't really feel like I needed to worry about, like, it's easy. I'm out there doing this. So, it's easy to sit back and be a sideman. But, I realized that it was important for me that I had something I wanted to say, and I wanted to get it out there. And I guess coming out of the 2020 situation, that I was ready to do that, I reached out to someone who I had worked with only a few times before, but always had a good relationship with. And so I called Greg Manning and I said, yeah, I really want to do, a smooth jazz single. And he said, why? Like, God, it was like, man, you do this. But so we talked for a bit, and we, as it turns out, I was going to be in Las Vegas, where Greg lives now, with Smokey Robinson. I was playing at the Venetian, and I stayed a few extra days, and we went and hung out, and we did my first single there with him, and the chemistry was great, and we've been on a good run since then. So it was just the timing was right.
When you did big band, did you do a lot of swing?
When I refer to my band, my big band, I do refer to it as a big band and not a jazz orchestra, which I think is a similar genre. But I think it's sort of telling that I define my band as a big band because for a lot of what we do, I think a big band should swing. I mean, for me, the definitive version of a big band was the Count Basie Orchestra. There's no band that swung like that. And the writers that wrote for that band, Neil Hefti and Sammy Nestico, these were guys that like inspired me as a composer, and I wanted to kind of recreate that, but with my own voice. So I think that's just really one of the best sounds that you're going to find for big band. But at the same time, I also had this passion for Latin jazz too, and big band really was a great outlet for Latin jazz. So I was able to kind of
what Latin big bands did you like most?
Actually, probably was Arturo Sandoval. Great compositions, great execution, great arrangements, both that he did, and he worked with some other writers, but typically he was the composer on a lot of that stuff and then worked with an orchestrator. And I just thought that really defined that balance between true Afro-Cuban jazz and his passion for, the music of Dizzy Gillespie, of course, who really brought the Cuban jazz into America. But I think with the sophistication, he was originally on GRP records. You probably remember GRP. I mean, that's one of the reasons I got into playing contemporary jazz, is because of the incredible diversity of jazz artists on GRP. But specifically, it was a lot of the Latin jazz influenced. Dave Valentine, Arturo, Spyro Gyra. I mean, all of those, I think, had different kind of influence in my, I think my musical DNA.
Let's shift, but I don't want to go too far from where we are right now. Let's talk about songwriting a little bit. Every songwriter goes about his craft differently. How do you create an original song? And the reason I'm going to ask you this in multiple ways. If you're creating a single, that's one way to write. If you're creating an EP or LP, does it change your style of writing for each particular song? So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that process.
Sure. And I do have often considered myself a composer that plays saxophone. And I think a lot of artists really like the instrument is what defines them as a musician. And I kind of look at it from the other way. The saxophone is really the voice for me to show off the compositions. I mean, when I do a concert, it's like, I want you to hear this song. I like to be the one playing it, but at the same time, I'm super excited when I hear other musicians playing it. And that's a relationship that, you know, a lot of artists don't have if they just play their instrument. People can go to their concerts, they can hear them play, they listen to their recordings, they can even maybe play along with their recordings if they play the same instrument. As a composer, people are going to be able to find their own connection to you and your music by playing it themselves. And I'm very fortunate that a lot of my big band music is published, so it's actually available not just in this country, but internationally. So I have I find recordings from China, from Japan, from the Ukraine, from Russia, from Poland, from France, all over the world, of course, all over the United States, playing and interpreting my music. Now, sometimes it's like, wow, that's incredible what they're doing. Other times it's questionable, some of the choices that they make.
Well, I don't want to lose the focus. How do you compose?
Okay.
What's your style?
I appreciate you allowing me to digress for a second. So that's
right.
It's a lot of times it's certainly built on, you know, something as simple as like, you know, a tempo, and I'm like, I mean, I'm kind of hearing Bring It On in my head right now, but you know, a lot of times it's like if I'm walking at a certain tempo, you know, a certain speed. I'm a bike rider too, so a lot of times when I'm not focused on music, I have my keyboard right here. If I'm doing something that kind of requires another thought process where I'm not completely thinking about music, often that song will come to you based on a rhythm. You had asked me before when we were talking about lyrics. I do not write lyrics. It's just not something that's natural for me. I mean, there's certainly a few lines that I might have written here or there and contributed. The extent of my lyrics is basically the title of my songs. That's about the most lyrics that I write. And you got to sum it up in that title, which is hard, but I do spend a lot of time trying to find a good title for my songs. But yeah, a lot of times it's based on a rhythm or a certain kind of groove. If I'm thinking like in the smooth jazz genre, there's actually a lot of different, you know, a lot of it certainly sounds very similar. But I think the artists that really are true artists are the ones that are doing something that's unique. And I really try to find my own voice with stuff. And that means like, okay, you know, we did, you know, a tune at this tempo in 4/4. So my second single was Lean Into It, and it was in 3/4 time. And it was a funky 3/4 time. And it starts off with this guitar riff, and it was a lot of people listen to it. It's like, wow, that's really groovy. And then they forget that it's in 3/4. It just sounds like it's grooving. So
You know,
that rhythm can be a departure.
Yeah, let me interrupt you for a second because I assume that when you start to compose, you pointed to your piano or the keyboard. Do you compose on the keyboard?
I do. But at the same time, I'm also kind of thinking how it feels in my hands. Even if I don't have the horn in my hands, I'm still thinking, you know, I'm able to kind of have that muscle memory of my instrument in my hands when it's not in my hands. So when I'm thinking in certain keys, but definitely, you know, as I said, I took piano lessons. So, you know, I a lot of times I'll start at the piano just because it allows me to kind of shape ideas, and also thinking, you know, harmonically,
right,
you know, different things. So I'm not a piano player, but I can get around on the instrument. I've done some gigs on instrument. I play on piano, but you know, I defer to people who are better at what they do. When it comes to, you know, I might write an idea for a bass line, but when I give it to Brian Bromberg, I'll say, man, you're a bass player. You can come up with something better.
Do you chart and score for your band?
Say that again.
Do you do the charting and scoring? for your band?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because I'm, I'm not a person that likes to transcribe other people's music. People have reached out to me. Oh, hey, can you transcribe this recording for me so I can play it? I think of myself as a composer. So, but I use Finale for all of my writing. So I typically do all the charts and prepare all the music for my musicians. Certainly the big band.
So I'm curious, when you lay down a new song and you say, "Hey, this is really good," who's your first go-to person? Who do you give it to listen to?
Well, it depends on the context. If I'm writing something for big band, I've been very lucky to have some really talented college students that when I work with my college band, a lot of times they're the ones that beta tested a lot of my new music.
Wow, okay.
So, they see it before it ever gets published, before it gets recorded. The smooth jazz stuff, that comes in different ways. Sometimes I'll just bring it onto a gig. There's some gigs that I do where it's just a jazz gig and people call tunes, and I'll be like, "Hey man, I just worked on this thing. Would it be cool if we played it?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." I play with musicians that I like to play with because they're open-minded enough. Some musicians, particularly jazz musicians, they're like, "No, let's just play tunes we know." I like playing tunes that I don't know because all of a sudden I'm learning something. I'm
So you don't have a one person go-to person.
As I said, I work with a lot with the smooth jazz stuff. I've been doing a lot with Greg Manning. I trust him.
Okay.
Because a lot of producers, when you go to them, and we know they're all great producers and they do what they do really well. But their, I think, attitude is like, yeah, you come to me because you want a track that sounds like what I, as the producer, does. When I go to Greg Manning, we had long talks about this, and he is able to create tracks for me and that sound like an Andrew Neu track and not a Greg Manning track that Andrew just happens to be playing on. So he has embraced my sound as an artist and not try to impose his sound as an artist or producer over me.
Let's give somebody another taste of your music. I want to play After Party. Why don't you tell people a little bit about After Party and how that song was created?
I always had an affinity for the music of the 1960s, particularly like Henry Mancini or Burt Bacharach. John Barry was a composer, did all the James Bond movies through the 1960s. Sergio Mendes, we had the influence of like the Brazilian bossa nova, Antonio Carlos Jobim. And then boogaloos, and like there was a lot of really cool crossover music with movie music, pop music, and jazz music. Quincy Jones was starting to become a player at that point, very early on. Things like soul bossa nova, who, by the way, he also got his start with the Count Basie Orchestra. So I really wanted something that kind of harkened back to that sound. You'll hear I did a flute arrangement on that, and it should hopefully sound like something from like a heist movie, like the Ocean's 11 or the Pink Panther or something. So that's what I was going for.
Gotcha. Let's play After Party with the wrong cover art again, and I hope everybody's going to really enjoy this. That's great, Andrew. Terrific composition. I really love that. We have comments from more of our viewers, but we don't have time. Time is running out on us very quickly here.
I
So I
know
want
you
to move
said it
ahead.
would go fast.
Yeah, I want to move ahead so we can get more of your music in. Um, since you left smooth jazz, came back to smooth jazz, I want to talk to you just a minute about the future of smooth jazz as a genre. It's now receiving tremendous competition from chill music and lo-fi, incorporating both Latin and Afrobeat into the music and some hip hop. What do you think about the future of smooth jazz, and are you are you looking to move back into other subgenres?
That's a big question, and certainly we could talk for a long time in that. I think
No, we
the
can't.
I know we don't have the time for it, but I think the influence of other styles of music are not a bad thing. Yeah, as far as the future of smooth jazz, I mean, I don't want to address it. I can only contribute my small part of it, but I feel that I haven't changed my mission. I keep wanting to put out music that I'm proud of, music that I can come back to 20 and 30 or 40 years from now and still be proud of. I'm not trying to recreate something that somebody else already did. To me, that wouldn't be a true artist. I mean, for me, I want to put out music that represents who I am as a person and as a musician, and I think there has to be that honesty about it. And when you try to cater to someone else's choices or someone else's style, I mean, they were always chasing after certain things, that's when it becomes ingenuine. And I think that's really the true downfall of the genre, is when you're just trying to imitate something that's
Well,
already there.
that's why I brought this up, because that is one of the things that's happening. To get airtime, there's a certain kind of sound they want to hear in smooth jazz, and it's repetitive. It has, and that's been the problem. Initially, it was not just evolutionary, it's revolutionary. Then it's become repetitive. I chose your music because when I listen to a lot of smooth jazz, and I've listened to you over the years, and your music has an edge that is not like the song we just played just now, After Party. That's not a classic smooth jazz song by any stretch of the imagination. That's what I like about your music. You're willing to step out, and do something different. I had Niels Gipner on my show. I'm sure you must know Niels.
Yeah, we just
And
worked together.
yeah, and when he did, Pacific Coast Highway, it was groundbreaking. And within smooth jazz, there's very few of you. Most people are just repetitive, and it's also why I think you're seeing more chill and more lo-fi. I think people are looking for something new, and not just Andrew Neu, but something new.
Yeah, I like that. That's great.
Yeah. So, anyway, I wanted to just talk to you about that. Um, so, are you really considering any genre shifting at all from what
Um,
you've been doing recently?
well, I mean, I have my, a lot of irons in the fire musically, just because I'm constantly trying to challenge myself. And as I said, I'm, staying involved with big band music, which, is surprisingly active, because I'm working with a lot of young musicians who are playing at a ridiculously high level. I conducted the All-State Jazz Band in New Jersey last year, and those musicians, these are young musicians, high school students that they're studying with people in New York City and in Philadelphia. They're taking their private lessons with people like, Bob Mintzer, and that's the level of musician. Well, not Bob, because Bob's in California now, but that's they're studying with incredibly talented musicians, and they're really passionate about it. So young musicians are creating really great traditional jazz and big band jazz, and the contemporary thing is like a whole other like subgenre, and they're all crossing over with each other, but they're pushing the quality of it,
They're
so it's
pushing the
not a
boundaries.
dead art
Look,
form.
yeah. Well, look, I want to play another one of your songs. We're running out of time. I want to play Evening Stroll. Let me play it, and
Hmm.
with the wrong cover art again, I apologize. And then we'll come back and you'll tell everybody about the backstory on Evening Soul, okay? On Evening Stroll. Okay, here we go. Wow, love it. Now, briefly, I want to focus when you talk about the backstory on the rhythm, because it's clearly I think it has some Latin influences. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, the subtitle of this is Passeggiata, which is the title I really wanted to call it, but I was afraid I struggle to pronounce that. So, and there's a thing that happens in Italy every evening where people just kind of go out and they stroll before they had dinner, have some gelato, and there's something very kind of social about it. So I wanted to celebrate both the Italian lifestyle with the music of Brazil. And I play a lot of not just Latin jazz, but specifically Brazilian jazz. And there's a certain kind of a calmness, intimacy about that. There's no actual drummer. We just have percussion on that tune. We had the flute arrangement
Right.
there. That's my big brother Peter playing all the flugelhorns you hear in there. So we wanted something. I wanted to do something that, I believed in harmonically. I wanted to do something a little bit more complicated and yet still, I think there's a way of having a high level of musicality and complexity, but still make it accessible.
Yeah, I love that track, and that's why I wanted you to talk about a little bit about the rhythm section and about what you were trying to achieve in that song. Look, I want to ask you one or two questions quickly, and I'm going to play the last song of the evening. We can run over a little bit. That's the pleasure of me having my own show and my own station. So,
Love
so,
it.
but Andrew, I want to have you back when you're going to drop some more music because we got a lot more things to talk about. So I want to have you back.
That
But
would be wonderful.
here's a thought question for you. If you could collaborate with any songwriter, producer, musician, vocalist, any place in the world from any century, who would be number one on your bucket list and why?
Well, I know at this point I've listed a lot of the musicians that inspired me up to this point, and I think I probably would have mentioned any of them up at that point. A few years ago, somebody asked me in an interview, it's like, oh, tell me about yourself, and I started listing, oh, I played with Bobby Caldwell and Diane Schuur and Smokey Robinson and Keiko, and it's like I started listing all these names of people that I played with, and he said, no, 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 what have you done? And I was like, well, I played with these people, but yeah, but what have you done? And it made me think that, you know, what defines me as a musician isn't just the list of all those other people that I played with. That's not who I am as a musician if I really want to be an artist. So it might come off as like, egotistical and narcissistic, but at this point in my career, I mean, there's certainly a lot of wonderful musicians out there that I continue to collaborate with, but the best musicians out there are not necessarily the ones that you've heard of. They're the ones that allow you to be as creative as you can. But my focus right now is to try and get the music that I'm hearing and creating and writing right now. So I love playing with Rick Braun. I love playing with Keiko. I love working with Greg, and I love all of my musical friends and colleagues. But right now, I want to put out the music that I feel is important to me. I have something to say. So, you know, I think collaborating with other artists is always great, but right now, I've got something to say.
Terrific. That's a good answer. Um, if you want the audience who's listening in tonight, and we have right now 191,702 people listening in,
Hey,
just join.
everybody.
If you want them to remember one thing about this interview and about your music, what would that be?
Music is something that brings people together. It's certainly something we do for personal satisfaction, but at the same time, musicians, I think, sometimes forget that if there are four people on stage, the fifth member of that group is in the audience, is that audience. They're part of what you do. And the more you connect with them, you play better. And then if you're playing better, maybe they'll appreciate it more. And then like there's this synergy that happens back and forth. There's always this, the connection cosmically that happens. But when it happens at its best is when we're all truly being honest, both in the presentation, the music, our, how we communicate with the other musicians. The music we choose to create has to be true to ourselves, but at the same time also understanding that it's part of a greater whole. When we create music, it shouldn't be self-serving, because it should be to create a better place in the world, to create better music. It's not about like, hey, look at me. It's about when I play my instrument better, it's about making the whole greater. It's about honesty. And I think when we're all completely open with that and open to the accepting that of others around you, both as a fan and as a musician, you know, we're all better for it. And that's what makes it really truly work.
Terrific. Well, the time has really run out. I want to play the last song of the evening, Zambrano. And maybe afterwards you can just say a few words about the origins of that song. And then we'll wrap up. But I definitely, like I said, I want to have you back. We still have a lot more to talk about. So here's Zambrano by Andrew Neu. There's your big band.
That's it.
Wonderful. Tell us just really briefly, what's the backstory for Zambrano?
Well, I definitely wanted to embrace the one before that was more Brazilian jazz. This one is definitely Afro-Cuban jazz. And of course, I mean, I really tried to do a deep dive into learning that genre. And this is my, kind of, I think, experiment in terms of learning really how to write for that kind of music, and also try and find something that was, catchy and accessible. Now, of course, that I have to feature trumpet. You hear trumpet on so much of my music. That was the great Randy Brecker, who I mentioned, an hour ago, about someone that inspired me as a musician, talking about collaborating. I got to collaborate with one of my heroes. That was Randy Brecker on that recording.
Wonderful. Well, look, Andrew, it's been a phenomenal evening. I appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. And we have so much more to talk about. And like I said a couple of times already, I'm going to have you back when you're going to drop some new music. So why don't you tell people how they can reach you, become a fan, buy your music, hear where you look and see where you'll be performing. Tell people how to find you.
The best place, I mean, as long as you spell my last name correctly, and that's always the hard part, but it's, if you go to my website, I keep that updated. My dates are on there, and that is Andrew Neu, NEU.com. Best place to check me out there. We just redid the website, so it looks great, and we keep there's a lot of great information there, but as I said, I'm keeping it updated so you can see where I'm going to be. Some shows with Keiko Matsui. I got my own shows out there. We have this great tribute to Bobby Caldwell coming up, so we have new music coming out at the end of September, and we're looking to do another Christmas release at the end of the year too. So a lot of things happening right there. We're streaming on all platforms, Spotify, wherever you like to hear your music. We're on Instagram. So please connect with me, reach out to me, say hello. I love to stay connected with you guys and just see what's going through your mind. I want to be part of your community.
Terrific, Andrew. Look, this fall we'll hook up again, and we'll have you back on with some of your new music. If you want to hang around there after the show for a minute, we can chat. But again, I really appreciate it. It's been a wonderful evening. I want to thank you.
Believe me, the pleasure was mine, Mel. Thank you so much for having me here. And thank you to everyone who's tuning in tonight, and hopefully checks us out later too. I think this is a great hour of talking about a lot of good stuff.
Wonderful. Have a great evening.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye. Well, that was a great Andrew Neu. I'm so glad I finally got around to having him on the show. Now, next week, we have another great artist for you. This is Monica Ryan, and you're going to find her vocals absolutely delightful. Very interesting vocalist. So, be sure to tune in next week again for another edition of the Jazz Confusion Power Hour. I'm Mel Albin, telling everybody to have a great night, and I'll see you next week.
I'm Albin. I'm the host and the founder of the Jazz Confusion Power
My name
Hour.
is Diane, and I'm honored to share my passion of music with you, our listening audience, through my cultural heritage.
Things can change for you too. If you want to be brand new, that is absolutely possible.